Okay, so as a coach or as a player, it's very important to have a goal, an end goal or a target for why we would use the ground reaction force in the golf swing. If we want to understand and see the real amount of energy and power that's being generated from the ground up into the body, power into the system. My system, a dual 3D force plate system, measures it as total torque. In the science labs, they will be calling it or naming it the sum of the moments of the ground reaction force. So when we look at total torque, we're interested in two things. We obviously need to look at the peak value. So if we look at the peak value on the total torque, it's 24.31. That's a scale to body weight percentage. And the peak, which is measured in Newton meters per second, is the peak torque is 225.19. So the peak is interesting, but we do want to know what this graph is made up of, this total torque. How do we come to these figures here? So that's made up of the horizontal plane torque and the frontal plane torque. So when we look at these two, both horizontal and frontal, we look at the body weight percentage, and we like to see a balance with those. For somebody that's kind of looking for a bit of everything, both sort of speed and accuracy and controlling kind of strike, we are looking for kind of a nice balance between those two. The key thing though is the impulse, okay, and that's the area beneath the peak. Let's look at total torque and how it moves, how dynamically it moves throughout the golf swing, how it's calculating that kind of energy produced from the ground reaction forces. So let me play this through and we're going to look at total torque. So as we can see the numbers changing and growing, the impulse, and below that the impulse of the body weight. So as we reach around sort of P3 and we start going into a positive number in total torque, so we're offsetting the negative energy that we've had to start the golf club to get into backswing, and now obviously there's quite a lot of energy going into the club in the opposite direction to change direction. We've got to make the club go into forward swing and get energy out to the golf club and the ball. So we reach the peak value of total torque there at around P4.5, and we can really see the impulse growing. So this torque or energy into the system over time, this area beneath the peak here. So I get down to around shaft parallel here, P6. We're looking at that energy over time. So I've got 39.94 of Newton meters per second that I've generated. Those linear forces are combined together. They're turning these cogs. They're creating this total torque. So my body weight percentage, my body weight per second, we've got 4.31. Getting that total torque figure is an immediate kind of number there, feedback that we know what the player has done. So like I said at the start, the goal is for the coach and the player to know exactly how much energy has been put into the system. Not just looking at one engine, looking at both of the key engines that turn and move the body and aid the body in its motion above the ground. Total torque is made up from two torques, which we use in the golf swing: frontal plane torque and horizontal plane torque. Okay, so in this video, video number 2, I'm going to talk a little bit more about horizontal plane torque. This camera view that I've given you here, straight down from the ceiling, imagine that I'm standing on a child's merry-go-round. So this merry-go-round is traveling horizontally in a rotation. So horizontal torque is measured and displayed on this top right-hand yellow graph. The two components that we need to know: we need a force from the lead foot, toe to heel force, both lead side on this graph here, and toe to heel force from trail side, this graph here. So to create a torque, we need to exert a force in a direction away from the center of mass. I've just drawn crudely the center of mass of my body. If I was to create or make a force in this direction with toe heel, we'll create a ground reaction force in the opposite direction. If I was to simply create this force through the center of mass, I would just move forwards. So it's a force away from the center of mass that we need, getting that merry-go-round to twist. I mentioned to you that I had drawn the center of mass here. The plates that I use, dual force plate system that I use made by Gasp, calculates and measures center of mass. So in its vertical location, so this is my left foot, right foot, in its vertical location, and then that's projected down on the ground. And the blue line on the plate here is the trace, and the red trace line is the trace of the center of pressure. So as we play this swing back and we start to reach our peaks, as we can see, that is being driven primarily by the lead side force. We have the center of mass location, so we can now draw a moment arm. So you can see from this green arrow here, I'm just going to just zoom in a little bit more, I'm going to take the center of mass out of it, but we see from this green arrow that's pointing backwards and behind me. As I move it round, you can see how that is going to start to move this merry-go-round around in this anti-clockwise direction. The action of the lead foot to create that AP force, that toe heel force, is a feeling that you're driving the foot forwards out of the left hand shoe. So the reverse is happening actually in the right foot. So if effectively I am pushing back in this direction with the right foot, anywhere back is going to, and away from the center of mass, is going to give me a ground reaction that's going to push in this direction. So again, I'm going to bring it right down to where I was on the last video. So shaft parallel to the ground. Around that sort of time is our impulse figure kind of climbing to its highest amount there. So I've got 36.09 Newton meters per second, 3.89 body weight per second as an impulse over body weight. We know the importance and the power driven from the lead side. See that here versus how much is contributing to that torque amount there from the trail side. Okay, so frontal plane torque is the second or other contributor to that total output and total torque that I spoke about on video 1. So to create that torque, and I call it a windmill torque, so I've drawn a circle coming out of my center of my body there. To create that torque, we need to know a couple of things. As I mentioned before, with the horizontal plane torque, we importantly need to know where the center of mass is. We have that located in its vertical form here. We need to know the two forces. So effectively we've got vertical force left, vertical force right. Add those together, we have a combined vertical force here. And then the tail of that combined vertical force vector is your pressure trace, your center of pressure. So we've got our center of mass, we've got our force, and then we're going to measure our moment arm, okay? So I've got moment arm measured in this graph here, frontal plane in this graph here, vertical lead foot, vertical force through the right foot, trail foot here, and we've also got left-right force, which I will also discuss shortly. So we've got this animation, which is really cool. In the backswing, the club, we take this windmill and its torque, the club is moving clockwise. In the downswing, the arms, hands, and club are moving anti-clockwise. We're going to see this clockwise torque being applied to move my club back, okay? And then there's going to be a torque applied to number 1, slow the club down, and effectively number 2, to change direction of the club. As I take the club back and I get to the top of the backswing, but actually we're reaching the point where we've hit the peak moment arm. So if we look at the red arrow, we can see at that point it's its furthest distance away from the center of mass. Effectively, we can see from that right-left force climbing and ramping how that's leaning the arrow, the grey arrow, and the red arrow leaning it away from the center of mass. So at this point as well, and we can see that from the kind of both of the vertical force vectors here, we're quite unweighted. So as we go, I'm going to just play the video down to P6. Around P6, we're going to be able to read our impulse, the area below the peak, the torque over time. So around this point, I'm 7.5 Newton meters per second of impulse, which is a percentage of 0.76 body weight per second. So that's the second generator of that total energy, total torque output, and the importance of frontal plane, its role and what it plays in the golf swing, how it helps and facilitates and aids the motion of the body. And importantly, the total torque, the total energy that you're putting into the system, okay? What you've got from the 2 generators of the power station, the horizontal torque, the frontal plane torque, the forces that are acting upon them, injecting energy into the system.